Google has finally made their Google Podcasts app available on iOS. They've also expanded the web capabilities of Google Podcasts, and they've completely redesigned the Android app as well. So in this video, I'm going to take you through what's new with Google Podcasts. I'm going to show you the main features of the app on both iOS and Android, and I'm going to take you through how I use the new Google Podcasts app and why you may want to consider using it as your default podcast app, especially if you have Google Assistant speakers. Let's dive in. By far, the biggest advantage to using Google Podcasts over other podcast apps out there is if you listen to podcasts on Google Assistant displays. If you're an iPhone user, you really haven't had a reliable way to start playing a podcast on a Google Assistant speaker or speaker group, pause that podcast, and then pick it up right where you left off on your iPhone until now with Google Podcasts. With Google Podcasts, you can tell Google on your Nest Hub Max, for example, to play the latest episode of New York Times The Daily. Then you can pause the podcast on your speaker, take out your phone, open the Google Podcast app, and return to your podcast right where you left off. Now, if you've been using the Google Podcast app on Android for a while now, you're going to notice that the new version of Google Podcasts looks quite a bit different from the previous version. The design is pretty much exactly the same between the iOS and Android versions. The app is organized around three main tabs: Home, Explore, and Activity. The Home tab features a feed of new episodes from the podcasts that you've subscribed to and quick access to your podcasts at the top. When you select an episode, you'll see a play button, a button to add this episode to your queue, which we'll get more into in a second, a download button that will download the podcast episode to your device, and a share button. Below those buttons, you'll see show notes for the podcast, which can often include things like external links to things talked about in the podcast, as well as discount codes and links to products that are sponsoring the podcast episode you're listening to. At the bottom of the page, you'll see topics or people Google has recognized that are covered in the podcast episode. Clicking on the topic or person's name will bring you to a Google search result on that topic or person. When you play a podcast, a card will pop up that will appear in the app, which you can slide back down so you can view the main tabs, and it will remain at the bottom of the app where you can slide it back up again into the main view. The main view tab shows you the main podcast image, the episode title, play, skip forward, and back buttons, a scroll bar where you can skip to different parts of the podcast episode, a queue button which when clicked will show you the current episode playing as well as what's next in your podcast queue. Next to the queue button is the playback speed button where you can slow down the speed to 0.5 times or speed up the speed of the podcast to 3 times. In this view, there's also a nifty button you can select that will trim the silence in your podcast when people aren't talking, which will ultimately speed up the time it takes to listen to the podcast. There's also a sleep timer button as well, so if you go to sleep listening to a podcast, you can actually set the podcast to stop after a specific amount of time within the app. Next, we have the information button, and this will just show you more info about the episode and the topics explored in the podcast episode. Clicking the 3 dots will bring up a secondary mini window with options to bring up the share sheet on iOS and Android, or to mark the episode as played. Now, if you have a bunch of Google Assistant speakers or Google Cast enabled speakers like I do, such as Nest Minis, Nest Hubs, the Google Home speaker, or any speaker you've plugged a Chromecast audio into, you actually have the ability to cast your podcast to these speakers or speaker groups by clicking on the cast button in the top left-hand corner and choosing the speaker group you want to cast to. And once you tap on that speaker or speaker group, your podcast will begin playing on it. Let's go back and look at the Explore tab. The first thing you'll see is a For You section, which will show you new shows and episode recommendations based on your interests. You can scroll through the top bar to see popular podcasts in different categories, and of course there's a search bar at the top to help you find exactly what you're looking for. And you do have the ability to turn on and off the personalized recommendations in the Google Podcast settings. Also, if you need more podcast recommendations, I'll make sure to leave my personal favorite podcasts that I listen to every week in the video description below. And if you have a favorite podcast that you love listening to, leave a comment below as well. I'd love to see what podcasts everyone is listening to out there. All right, now the last tab is the Activity tab. The Activity tab will display your queued up episodes, downloaded episodes, your listen history, and all of the podcasts that you currently subscribe to. The first thing you'll see is your queue. These are made up of specific podcast episodes that you have added to your queue through the app. The way I use it is any podcast episode I want to listen to, I add it to my queue and then I manage the order. Now, managing the order is a little bit different between iOS and Android. On iOS, to remove a podcast from your queue, click it and then click the three dots and then select Remove from your queue. On Android, you can do this by clicking the Edit button at the top and then select the episodes that you want to remove from your queue. On both apps, you can easily tap and drag episodes around to reshuffle your queue. All right, next and real quick, I want to dive into the settings of the Google Podcast app because Google has added some new things in here that I do want to mention. You can get to settings by clicking on the three dots when you're in the Activity or Explorer tabs, or by tapping on your Google profile icon when you're in the home screen of the app. In settings, you have quite a few options, including auto download, which will automatically download new episodes of the podcast that you subscribe to. And you do have the option to select which podcasts you want to automatically download new episodes of. Removed completed episodes allows you to specify the time where completed episodes will be removed from your queue and downloads. Remove unfinished episodes allows you to specify when you want Google Podcasts to remove episodes you never got to from your queue and your downloads. In notifications, we have some new stuff. You can enable notifications of new podcast episodes for specific podcasts that you subscribe to. Also, you have the ability to turn off personalized recommendations, and you have the ability to autoplay from your queue when opening the app. All right, and the last thing before we wrap up this video is Google Podcasts for the web. In a web browser, you can go to podcasts.google.com to explore new podcasts, as well as see and manage your podcast subscriptions. To see your subscriptions, click on the menu at the top left-hand corner and select Subscriptions. There, you'll be able to see your subscriptions and continue listening where you left off in your different podcasts. Do note that at the time of this recording, you can't seem to get to the queue of podcasts that you create in Google Podcasts for the web. All right, well, that's pretty much it for everything on the Google Podcast app. If you have any feedback for Google on the app, you can submit it to them by clicking the three dots or tapping your Google profile icon in the app's home screen and then select Send Feedback. All right, well, that's it for our overview of Google Podcasts. If you liked this video and found it helpful, hit that thumbs up button below and subscribe to the channel to see more videos on Google products and services like this one. For 6 months later, I'm Josh Tedder. Thanks for watching.